So what I want to share with you today is a little bit of the backstory behind MeMed and how we can use the type of technologies that we develop in MeMed to try to aid in the fight against COVID. So I'll start first of all with a general overview about MeMed and why we wake up in the morning. And what MeMed specializes in is decoding the signals of the host immune response, that means your body, in order to generate simple insights that improves people's lives. Now, this is a very big sentence, and let me try to reduce this to practice with one example of a product that we've been developing for almost 7 to 8 years. I'll show you that, and then we're going to go and expand and see how to use the same type of technology to fight against COVID. So the first challenge we went to tackle is trying to be part of the solution to the following seemingly simple problem. You have a child, they're sick, they have a fever, or maybe you're sick, or maybe your parents. Often the clinical question is, well, whether it's a bacterial or viral infection, to treat with antibiotics or not to treat with antibiotics. And the problem is that we really don't know, because bacterial and viral infections are often clinically indistinguishable. Because of this uncertainty, we have both overuse of antibiotics. Every second antibiotics is being overprescribed to a non-bacterial infection, to which it was not supposed to be prescribed in the first place. And we also have underuse. That means 1 in 5 patients that have a bacterial infection are not receiving antibiotics, even though they're supposed to. And that has also pretty severe consequences. Now, why do we have this challenge? Several things. First of all, many of the technologies that we have today require hours and even days. Often when it comes to acute infections, COVID, bacterial-viral infections, you want a solution here and you want it now. You don't want to wait. Second, you want it to be very easy to use. Third, you want it to work on inaccessible infections. For example, ear infections, sinusitis, bronchitis, pneumonia. Infection site is not readily accessible, so hard to sample it. Fourth, your colonizers. So the mere fact that you detect a bacteria or a virus doesn't mean that that bacteria or virus caused the disease. And lastly, pandemics and epidemics. So this is actually a slide from 4 or 5 years ago. We did not create it for COVID, and I'm getting here a lot of questions. Let me just see here what the questions are. Okay, fine. I just wanted to make sure that people can hear me. So this slide is something that we've created, again, several years ago. And guess what? This is not the first pandemics that we went through, right? We had the H1N1 swine flu, H2N3, MERS, SARS. And so what's happening every time we develop a new technology, suddenly it only works on the current strains, but doesn't work on the next generation of strains that we encounter. So what if we can also develop a technology that we don't have to reinvent every time we meet a new strain or new pandemic? These are the challenges that we went after. And when we set on the journey, we imagined a small benchtop device, a small volume of blood, a few minutes that would tell you bacterial versus viral infection to treat or not to treat. That's the dream. In the process, there's 2 parts of the solution. The first one, we created a signature that uses the body's host immune response to bacteria and to viruses. It turns out that your body responds very differently if you have a bacteria or a virus. It's not one molecule, it's a set of molecules, particularly something called soluble proteins. We basically measure them and then use computational algorithms, machine learning, and AI to combine them to give a simple understanding of bacterial viral infection to treat or not to treat. Now, ideas are very easy, are very cheap. Doing PowerPoints is very simple, or PowerPoint engineering is simple. Doing hardware engineering and system engineering and biochemical engineering is much harder. So it took us nearly 8 years to take it from an idea in a napkin through initial discovery and then validation in external double-blinded prospective studies, enrolling tens of thousands of patients. Here you see a few of them. They were published in the Lancet ID, Pediatrics, BMJ Peds, et cetera, by external groups. And what we've been able to show that we can detect this signature with these molecules, some molecules that we've identified, these proteins, with an accuracy, a sensitivity, and specificity of over 90%, which was quite high. Now that's part of the journey, but it's not good enough, because if it cannot fit into the workflow, it's just going to be a very nice publication. And the challenge is that some of the molecules that we're measuring are in the picogram per ml range. Now, to explain to the audience that is less technical what picogram per ml range, imagine that you have a soccer field covered with about 2 kilometers of M&Ms, candy. And now you hide a random number between 0 and 1,000 Skittles. And you have to go and count the Skittles. And you have 15 minutes. Move. That's the challenge. So to measure the signature that we've developed through the years, we have to come out with this technology that can do that. Now, I'm not going to take you through the failures, and there was quite a lot of failures, but in the process, Kfir, our CTO, came up with a really interesting idea, which is let's take a huge machine that can actually do this, miniaturize it, and therefore bring the power of a central lab machine that can measure proteins in these small concentrations into a small point of need device. And this is what you see here. This is MeMed Key. Again, this is work of many years, done in parallel to developing the signature. It's been backed heavily by Department of Defense, European Commission, about $35 million. And we actually received CIVD clearance in Europe a few weeks ago. Okay, so how do we take this into the realm of COVID? When COVID broke out, we've seen a remarkable effort by different stakeholders, whether it's the IVD, in vitro diagnostic companies, whether it's Abbott and Roche and Diasorin and BioFire, CDC, BARDA, everybody coming together trying to come up with different technologies that help us detect, screen, and monitor the disease. How can we use the host immune response to complement what we have today? Several things, and I'll show you some, give you a little bit of a taste of some of the things that we've been doing at MeMed. The first thing is actually using the pre-existing technology, B versus V, bacteria versus viral infections, because it turns out that when you have COVID, the problem of antibiotics overuse or misuse is actually exacerbated. And you can use this type of a technology potentially to aid in ruling out a bacterial co-infection in COVID patients and thereby reduce antibiotics overuse. That's one off-the-shelf type of a potential usage of our technology. But you can take it also to other places. This is some data, and this is some technologies that we've started to work actually pre-COVID dates. It has value outside the context of COVID, but I want to talk about right now the value in COVID. So there's a core technology that we call MeMed Alert that basically tries to do the following thing. What if you can use your host immune response to tell you when you have a patient that is seems that has the same type of a disease or same type of severity as his fellow patients, then some of them will deteriorate, will require to be admitted in the ward and even in the ICU. What if you can come up with a technology or a signature that would tell you this in advance so you know how to utilize your resources in a much more efficient manner? This is one of the challenges that we have in COVID, the fact that we have to squash the curve and do the quarantine because we do not want to overwhelm the healthcare system. So this type of a triaging technology can help you. And it turns out, again, that some of those biomarkers, particularly one of the biomarkers in our original signature, has this diagnostic merit. If it goes up, it's viruses. If it goes down, it has bacterial infections. If it goes really low, then something bad happens. And right now, we're creating a signature around that in collaboration with multiple partners. Another example, what we call MeMed Early. Well, the immune system is a very sensitive detection system, probably the best sensor out there. So what if we can use it to tell you that you're going to be sick before you know that you're going to be sick? That can potentially have a lot of value in different scenarios. And right now we're running a big clinical study with some collaborators in Europe, specifically in the Netherlands, to try to answer this particular question, specifically, basically sampling hundreds of healthcare workers when they're healthy with anticipation that some of them will become sick with COVID and then go backwards to see whether we're actually able to catch that signature. A third one, and that's related to a very beautiful collaboration we've done with Clalit, the largest HMO in Israel. We're looking at severe cases in the ICU and using this technology to monitor their immune response. For example, to monitor what's called cytokine storms, which is something that can really lead to morbidity in those patients. And rather than giving them drugs, for example, steroids in dosages that are not specific to the patient, what if we can use the immune response to really tailor specific treatments or specific drugs in real time? You can use this technology that we've developed to really measure the immune response in very easy and high temporal dynamics. So there's going to be some very beautiful data that's going to come out pretty soon out of this collaboration. The last thing I'll share before I open the floor here to questions, this is actually the people behind the scenes, or not behind actually, they're in the front. So on the right, you see, well, the team, or at least part of the team in Zoom. In that respect, we're very much like any other company on the face of this planet. But on the left, you actually see some of the specific challenges that we have had to overcome or to deal with. MeMed is a company that works with a lot of clinical samples. We're almost like a vampire company where we have samples coming into our lab on a daily basis. So we had to upgrade our facility, but furthermore, send our teams to some of the sites, for example, the Sharon Hospital of Clalit, which is the COVID hospital of Clalit, and some other sites, to really do some of the work over there. That's a really remarkable, I would say, stepping forward by the team to allow some of the innovation that you will see in the coming weeks and months coming out of these collaborations. With that, I'll end and thank you and open the floor here for additional questions.
Thank you, Eran. I sent you a few questions in the chat.
Okay, so now let's see if I can actually see that, see the chat. Okay. Okay, so question number one, in response to the pandemic, have you been partnering with others to accelerate progress? If so, how? So the answer to that is yes, with a big exclamation mark. I think this problem is bigger than any single entity, company, and even government. And if you want to really contribute, you have to partner. We're partnering at several levels. The first one is with medical partners, clinical partners. We've opened clinical studies and pilots in collaboration with several medical centers in Europe, in Israel, in Asia, and in the US. And hopefully some of this data is going to come out. I give you the example with Clalit in the ICU. I give you an example of a Dutch medical center, and we're doing some other stuff. The second is with governments. So we're working right now with different governments around grants and non-dilutive funding and collaborations to try to drive some of these technologies that we've talked about. This activity started way before COVID, and it's going to continue right now. And then lastly is obviously commercial partners. So there's a lot of interest by different partners, commercial partners, to get access to this technology. And again, hopefully we're going to be able to share some good news in the short to medium term future around that. Moving on to the second question. Given your focus on the immune system's response to infections, diseases, how has COVID-19 impacted the MeMed team's day-to-day work? Wow. So again, I think we were impacted in two ways. The first one is like any company on the face of this planet, you have to learn how to work from remote, using Zoom or other types of technologies. And this is the type of challenges and opportunities that I think all of us are experiencing. But I think there's also a unique opportunity here, particularly for a company as MeMed, like MeMed, that uses the host immune response for infectious diseases and inflammatory disorders. We found ourselves in the middle of the storm. And the opportunities are twofold. The first one, it really forces you to embrace change, to drive innovation. And we've really seen a burst of innovation, things that otherwise would take a long time to make a decision. We just had to make very fast and rapid decisions. Then in terms of impact on the team, we had to make a decision to actually go out there, get access to samples on the day-to-day. And that's not a very easy ask from a team. And so we sat together, looked one another in the eye, asked ourselves, is that important? And we got to the conclusion, absolutely yes. As a company, we must go out there and drive, try to contribute to this effort. Again, we had a lot of people that were in the front line working with those samples, patient samples, in the last few weeks, months, and that has impacted, obviously, team tremendously. You can imagine that this is not an easy thing, but it's also feel a very big sense of reward and gratification. Third question. How has the pandemic impacted MeMed's growth plans for both the short and long term? So I think from our perspective, again, we're in a fortunate situation where the technologies that we've developed, and it takes years to develop it, they have a lot of value in days of peace, but also in days of war, like the war that right now we're fighting against COVID. So rather than slowing down, when this happened, we stopped for a second, looked left, looked right, and now we're basically accelerating. There's many opportunities that we're seeing right now. The challenge is actually not what to do, but actually what not to do. And you can expect that this is actually going to accelerate our growth, both from a R&D perspective, a regulatory perspective, and I would say growth of a team to really be able to capture all these opportunities. So acceleration in our case.
Eran,
yeah.
we have time for a last question. The questions that you didn't have time to answer, we have them and we'll be emailing the answers.
Okay. So I'll go for question number 4. How does MeMed leverage AI, machine learning, and other technologies to translate the signals of the immune system into its response to infections and actionable insights? So, well, I actually just came from another conference. Was giving a talk about something that's being pushed by the Innovation Authority in Israel, something called bioconvergence. Bioconvergence is actually not only AI. AI is a very important part of our strategy, but we go well beyond that. So where do we use AI? We use it in the development process to screen through the biomarkers, develop the signatures, and then the box itself also includes AI to run the actual algorithms that tell you if it's a bacterial, if it's a viral infection or alert, or we collect a lot of the data, as you can imagine, and that data is then can be processed and be used for other stuff. No, I'm in a meeting, and then can be used for other stuff. But I think the added value that MeMed can bring to the table is not only AI, it's taking AI together with deep understanding on the molecular side, deep understanding on the systems engineering side, on the medical side, manufacturing side. So it's something that there's good news and bad news. The bad news, very high entry barrier. The good news, very high entry barrier. So if you're able to create impact, something that's long lasting. So AI is just part of our strategy. And thank you everybody for attending this.